Hey, well, good afternoon and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're going to pick up where we left off in Matthew. Let's go straight into it. Matthew 26. Let me put my eyes on. Let's turn to Matthew 26, and I believe I think so. 57. If my memory is correctly, it is 57. Yes, it is verse 50. I believe it's verse 57, if my memory serves me correctly. And we're going to start out by reading on through verse 68 and just see how far we get today. Let's just read a few verses here. And those who laid hold of Joshua led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard. When he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and the council sought false testimony against Joshua to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last two false witnesses came forward and said, well, this fellow says, I'm going to destroy this temple of Elohim and I'm going to rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said, well, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? But Joshua kept silent. And the high priest answered him and said, now I put you under oath by the living Elohim. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the son of Elohim. I find that strange that he understands this, because we'll cover that. We're going to have more to say about that here in a bit, eventually, but my game plan is to cover that. Joshua said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming out of the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he's spoken blasphemy. What further evidence do we need of witnesses? You've heard his blasphemy. So what do you think? And they answered, he is deserving of death. Then they spat in his face and they beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, okay, prophesy to us, Messiah. Come on. Who struck you? Who hit you? Okay, anyone have any question or comments they have in mind concerning this passage they'd care to share? Anybody?
Hey, Curtis.
Yes, David.
Just real quick. So this occurrence is kind of what happened to him. They smote him on the face and then asked him to prophesy who did it. There is a connection to what we call the forensic statement analysis of how we should look at the Gospels. All three of them should be joined together to determine what actually happened. And so I think hopefully you're gonna go there, but why was it so significant that they—
The what analysis?
Forensic statement analysis.
Forensic statement analysis.
Yeah, or you take multiple viewpoints of a certain situation to determine actually what happened as a whole. And so
we got parallel accounts in Mark and Luke and John.
Yeah. So,
if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah, because Johannes has spoken to that, and he spoke on it like a champ, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. Anyone else have anything they'd care to share? A comment, a question about anything we've read so far? Okay, Larry, I figured you would.
Well, it's interested in the verse here where it's talking about that they said he had blasphemed. Are you talking about verse 65?
That's what the priest accused him of, yes.
Yeah. And so basically, it's interesting here in the footnotes. In my Bible it says, according to the oral laws of the Jews, if Joshua had blasphemed, then penalty would have been a scourging. But if he blasphemed using the sacred name Yahweh, then the penalty would be death. The fact that they quickly said he deserves death shows the sacred name was uttered by Joshua in verse 6.
Undoubtedly it was. Undoubtedly it was, Larry. 'Cause a lot of us, during our study, the name right a little over 20 years, about 25 years ago now already. Good grief, time flies. Because this group, as we know it, well, when we first moved in here, back in, what was it, Bob, 97, 98?
I think it was 98, I think.
97
It
or
may have
8,
been
one of those.
96 even,
97,
but
98, one of those.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. Even before the Y2K panic. That's how long we've been here. But we didn't always use the name, the Congregation of Yahweh. We were meeting in a different location and we were using I don't even remember what name we used. It was concerning the traditional names.
I don't remember that it was even that. I don't recall.
But in any case, or maybe when we first started using the names when we first moved here, it might have been that.
Tom Whitson was in charge at the time.
Tom Whitson was our pastor at the time. He was. And in any case, when we studied the issue of the names, some of us came to the conclusion that's exactly what Joshua had done. He had spoken what was called the sacred name, or he uttered the name of Yahweh. That he in fact spoke that name. Which is why the priest would say, which is why the priest condemned him to death, the priest through it said he was deserving of death. They heard his blasphemy, and then the Sanhedrin agreed he is deserving of death. Yes, Bob.
Have you ever mentioned publicly, like on outreach, where this name situation came up down there in Jeremiah?
All right, Bob.
I really, if you would clear that up, it would be really good for the audience that knows this. Why do the Jews,
okay,
if you will, why do they not say YAH?
Okay, hold your place in Matthew 26. We're going to answer Bob's question. I think Bob he already knows the answer to this question, but nonetheless, this is for the sake of newer folks in our audience.
Well, let me say this. The rendering that most people use is Yeshua, Yeshua, and not Yahshua. And the reason is what you're about to read.
The reason about what I'm, okay.
Go back far enough to make sure that they understand that what they were doing down there with the sun god.
Okay, our answer goes back to Jeremiah 42. Excuse me. I stand corrected. 44, not 42, 44. Jeremiah 44. Because 2 chapters earlier, a lot of Jews were preparing to flee to Egypt, and Jeremiah had warned them not to. And furthermore, they told him that they were not going to do the bidding that Yahweh had brought them. He had said, they asked him to see Yahweh, And we will do, you bring back answer, we'll do what he says. They utterly rejected the answer. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but I'll read the first couple of verses, and we'll go straight to the heart of the matter. So Jeremiah 44, verse 1. The word came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews who dwelt in the land of Egypt, at Migdol, at Taphanes, and Nov, in the country of Pathros, saying, so they ignored his advice. Some of them had fled already. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, you've seen all the calamity that I brought upon Jerusalem and all the cities of Judah. Behold, this day they are in desolation, but no one dwells in them. That's because the Assyrian army had made a couple of trips over there, and they'd done some damage. Verse 3, why did Yahweh do this? Because of the wickedness which they have committed to provoke me to anger, in which they went up to burn incense and to serve other Elohim whom they did not know, they nor your fathers. So not only they worship, what's the key here in verse 3? They're worshiping new beings, new Elohims, new false beings that they had never worshipped before. Imagine that. They had outdone what they had done previously. They did not worship the ones they knew in Egypt, or the ones that they raised up during the time of Judges, the rebellions in the wilderness, or any other time. No, they found them some new ones, some new groovier ones, better ones. Hey, we got this new groovy one. Now let's fast forward here, because we're going to see who this is. And this one is still around today. Some of us a quick question. We have any ex-Catholics in the room? I think we do. There's 2 or 3. Yeah, we got a few of us, so I think we know where we're going already. We're going to fast forward to verse 20. From the top of the chapter on down to verse 23, Jeremiah gets very specific about everything they had done. But if we fast forward to verse 33 and read through verse 26, 23 through 36, we will hit the heart. Hit the heart of the matter. This will be a kind of a Reader's Digest version of everything he had said up to this point. Verse 23, because you've burned incense, and because you sinned against Yahweh, and have not obeyed his voice, obeyed the voice of Yahweh, or walked in his law, his statutes, provisions, his testimonies. All that listed, just like all that listed. We see the same list of all his laws, his statutes, his testimonies in Genesis 26:5, like Abraham kept and obeyed, in contrast to these people here. Therefore, this calamity has come upon you at this day. Moreover, Jeremiah said to all the women. It's interesting here, because we'll touch on that in a moment. Hear the word of Yahweh, all you who are in the land of Egypt. He said to all the people, Jeremiah said to all the people and to all the women, so he was making a point to include them as well. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, verse 25, the Elohim of Israel says, you and your wives have spoken with your own mouths and fulfilled with your own hands, saying, we will surely keep our vows that we have made to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven. Queen of Heaven. That's mentioned about 3 or 4 other times between the top of the chapter and this point here. She's been mentioned 2 or 3 times, if not more. You have burned incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, and you will surely keep your vows and perform your vows. So what's the prophet mean? He said, okay, you know what? If that's what you want to do, y'all go right ahead. Yeah, the next one's a punishment, but he's saying, if that's what you're going to do, go right ahead. If you're going to worship the Queen of Heaven, you go right ahead. verse 26. Essentially, he's saying, but leave me out of it. Therefore, hear the word of Yahweh, verse 26. All Judah who dwell in the land of Egypt, behold, I have sworn by my great name, says Yahweh, that my name shall no more be named by any man of Judah in all the land of Egypt, saying, as the Yahweh lives. Verse 27, I will watch over them for adversity and not for good, and all the men of Judah who are in the land of Egypt shall be consumed by the sword and by the famine until there is an end of them. So, and he goes on down with a similar warning on down through the rest of the chapter, saying, running away is not going to do you any good. Nebuchadnezzar, I'm going to make sure Nebuchadnezzar chases you down. If he doesn't kill you, he'll take you into slavery. If he doesn't take you into slavery, he'll kill you. Bob, then Larry.
Basically, what happened, most of them died down there, but some of them obviously went back
Some did.
to their original location there in Judea.
Yeah,
And
Nebuchadnezzar drug some of them back with him.
This is something that has stuck with them from this time forward, that they absolutely will not speak that name. They'll admit it, that's what it is. If you ask them,
Yeah, I know you got a story about that, about a trip to Israel.
Yeah, we don't say that. I know for a fact because of where I was when I found out in the temple, the treasures of the temple over there in, I think the year was, it was the year 2000.
Yeah, that verse kind of smacked you in the face, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it did. I mean, he says, yes, but we don't say that. It was actually what it was, the crown of the high priest of the mannequin they had there. It was out, and said, yeah, that is correct. We don't say it. And so anyway, that's where this all came from. I'm absolutely sure.
Larry?
And before Jeremiah in Isaiah chapter 50, there's a prophecy here that we need to remember about the Messiah. And I'm going to begin in verse 4.
Go ahead.
Chapter 50. It says, Adonai Yahweh has given to me the tongue of learned ones, to know and help the weary with a word. He wakens me in the morning. He wakens the ear to me to hear as the learned. Adonai Yahweh has opened my ear, and I did not rebel. I did not turn away backwards. I gave my back to strikers and my cheeks to them that plucked off hair. I did not hide my face from shame and spitting. And Adonai Yahweh will help me. On account of this, I was not ashamed. On account of this, I set my face like flint, and I know that I shall not be ashamed. My justifier is near. Who will contend with me? Let us stand up together. Who is the master of my judgment? Let him come near to me. Behold, Adonai Yahweh will help me. Who is he who will condemn me? Behold, like a garment they shall wear out, and the moth shall not eat. And this is where it's really important. In verse 10 it says, who among you fears Yahweh, obeying the voice of his servant, and who walks in darkness and no light is in him? Let him trust in the name of Yahweh, and let him and lean upon his Elohim. So this verse 10 here really points out that the Messiah that would come, and all these things where he would be strucken on his back, he would be hit on his cheeks, his beard would be pulled, things like this. In verse 10 it says, who among you fears Yahweh, obeying the voice of his servant, who walks in the darkness and no light is in him? Let him trust in the name of Yahweh and lean upon his Elohim. So Bible prophecy clearly shows that the Messiah that would come would use the name of Yahweh, and he would trust in that name as his Elohim.
We also read something short and sweet in Psalms 22:22 concerning that. Sure. If anybody wants to read that very quickly. Go ahead.
I will declare your name to my brothers. I will praise you in the midst of the assembly.
It's that simple.
He used the name.
It really is that simple. He did use the name, and that's what got him condemned to death by the Sanhedrin and the high priest. Yes, Lucy.
You know what's interesting? In Israel, Isaiah 50 is actually banned, but a lot of like young people are actually like paying attention to Isaiah 50, and that's how a lot of them are coming to realization of who Yeshua was.
Nice. That's true.
Yeah, I can tend to agree with that. Yes, thank you. But what is it today about the Jews not using this name today? Well, I mean, after all, I've been told, come on, cowboy, he's talking about people that lived in that land at that time, but what if they still live in Egypt in their hearts to this day? Wouldn't that explain why they carry on so many of the same customs they do today, to this day? The ones that got them in trouble? Because this Queen of Heaven that we read about in Jeremiah, she's still around to this day. We see her very prominently in the Catholic Church. That's the easy one. But what about in somebody else doing this? At their Passover service or at their Passover Seder or every week when they bring in this certain customs, let's see, include Sabbath customs among some, include welcoming the Lady of the Sabbath. I'm wondering who that might be. I'm thinking, I'm scratching my head, and oh, is it the one we just read about in Jeremiah? Yeah, I'm being a little facetious, but you know, yes, it's the same one, and many other things that Jeremiah got onto the people about through Yahweh. By the way, Yahweh, it's actually Yahweh that did this. Got onto the people using Jeremiah as his tool, his spokesman. They know how he felt about it. So to this day, we still have, in a lot of synagogues, the same practices, the same thing going on, because they still metaphorically dwell in Egypt. Spiritually, they dwell in Egypt, even if not physically. So the principle applies, I believe. Anyone else? Okay, back to Matthew 26 then, please. Thank you, Bob. That was a good question, actually. Took a couple minutes, but it was worth the time, I believe. Okay, in verse 59, we read that the priests, the elders, and all the council are sought false testimony against Joshua to put him to death. But they found none, it says. I found that interesting. So many false witnesses. That's his old false witnesses. False witnesses came forward, they still found none. What sense can we make of this? How can many false witnesses come forward, but they still can't find any false testimony? Larry, you might have an idea. You got your hand up.
Yeah, well, you know, if two of us, if me and Bob were sitting here on the street corner and we witnessed a wreck, both of us would tell the same story. Problem is, these false witnesses had different stories.
Evidently, yes, that would be, yes, Larry, you're thinking about like I am. These people did not agree. They can't, in order for the court to do anything, witnesses have to agree.
There has to be at least 2 or 3 witnesses.
There must be at least 2 or 3. And they found 2. Let's examine Mark 14 for a moment, can we please? Hold your place, Matthew. Let's just see if we can't find some type of forensic agreement. What's that term again you used, David?
Forensic statement analysis.
The what?
Forensic statement.
Forensic statement analysis. Forensics. I got to write that down. Johann spoke upon that once upon a time, and he explained it like a champ. But that would be Mark 14. Let's start in verse 53. Let's see if we can't get a little bit different perspective here. And they led Joshua, Mark 14, picking up in verse 53. And they led Joshua away to the high priest. And with him were assembled all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. But Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and all the council, that is what would today, that would be the Sanhedrin. Now the chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Joshua to put him to death, but found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. How about that? Their testimonies did not agree. Which is why Matthew would say they found none. And both accounts say the testimonies did not agree, verse 56. Verse 57, some rose up and bore false witness against him. Well, we heard him say, I'm going to destroy this temple made with hands, and within 3 days I'll build another without hands. But they didn't but not even then did their testimony agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Joshua, well, don't you answer anything? Don't you have anything to say? What does these men testify against you? But he kept silent and answered nothing. Again, the high priest asked him and said to him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed? Joshua said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power, and coming into the house with the clouds of heaven. It is here. I can speak for myself. I think there are others that would tend to agree with me. It is here he actually spoke that dreaded four-letter word, Yahweh, Y-H-W-H, or Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Spelled out the name of Yahweh, which had become forbidden at that time. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, what further do we need to have witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy, now what do you think? They all condemned him to death. Some began to spit on him and blindfold him and beat him and say, okay, prophecy. And the officers struck him with the palms of their hands. So we're getting a few pieces of the puzzle fall together here. Because we're specific. What we figured and what we see written tend to agree that it's because they did not find, they couldn't find any false witnesses because their stories did not agree. The court couldn't do anything with stories that cannot agree. Let's try a few verses over in Luke 22, please. Let's see what kind of... Let's pick it up in verse 66. Now, as soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the scribes, came together, and they led him to their council and said, did I hear a voice?
22.
Luke 22. We're starting in verse 66. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the scribes, came together, led him to their council, saying, okay, if you're the Messiah, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you won't believe me. I'm thinking he said that to them. It's not the first time he said that to them. It's not the first time he's answered that to them, was it? If I tell you, you will by no means believe. And also, if I ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. I seem to recall an instance where he was called into question about whether or not it was lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. He had someone hand him a coin, and he held up and saying, okay, follow me. Whose image is on this? And they said, well, Caesar's. He said, very good. He said, now we give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to Yahweh what belongs unto Yahweh. Because what was key here, up to that point, they had asked him a question. He said, okay, I'll answer your question, but you got to answer mine first. He was asked on another occasion, okay, you answer my question. I'll answer your question, you answer mine first. The baptism of John, was it from men or from heaven? They conferred and said, well, we don't know. They didn't believe. They didn't believe all the things they'd seen and heard with their own ears and seen with their own eyes. And he said, okay, then I'm not going to answer your question either. Which would explain his statement here to the court. Verse 69. Hereafter the Son of Man will sit upon the right hand of the power, on the right hand of the power of Yahweh. So as we do this in line on line, precept on precept, undoubtedly this is what we're getting. That he did in fact speak the name of Yahweh. Then they said, are you the son of Elohim? They would not have said Yahweh. They would have said Elohim or Adonai or some other term. He said to them, you rightly say that I am. And he said, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it from ourselves from his own mouth. Anyone have any question or comment? So it's through quite a bit of line on line. Precept on precept. Here a little, there a little. It's like Bob and Larry suggested. That yes, he did in fact utter the name of Yahweh to the high priest. Yes, Larry.
In verse 70, and this it says, and they said to him, then are you the son of Elohim, just as you said? And he said to them, you say it because I am. And when he used the word I am, it was a direct reference through all the scriptures about the one who came in the name of Yahweh, the one that appeared before men, the one that appeared before Moses, who gave the law, that this was that being. And so, here they are about to put this man to death, and here he's telling them, I'm the one literally have had all the dealings with the nation of Israel from its beginning. How terrifying it must have been for those men.
Indeed, it must have been terrifying. Because if we back up, if we recall, John chapter 3, verse 1. Take it from the top. John 3, Joshua and Nicodemus are having their little discussion. Let's just go there. Hold your place, please. Let's go there. John 3. There was a man of the Pharisees. John 3, verse 1. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And this man came to Joshua by night, and he said to him, Rabbi, we know you are a teacher come from Elohim, because no one can do these signs that you do unless Elohim is with him. They knew. All along the way between here, what he had done before that brought on this comment by Nicodemus, and all the way up to that trial, only reinforced what they already knew. But they were still fought at tooth and nail. Yes, Beth.
Also in Luke 23, that at 68 he says, you're not going to believe me. 69 he says, blasts him. He went from, I'll not tell you, you won't believe me. You will not answer me, nor let me go. And then he says, Son of Man, blasted him. Played the same dance, but stronger and more powerful.
Yes. Let's see what we can find in John 18, please. And let's see what we can pick up Oh, let's start in verse 15. Well, this is where, okay, that's where. Let's go to verse 28, please. I don't know why I said it. That's verse 28. Because up to then we read about Peter denying Joshua. Now let's pick it up in verse 28 of John 18. Then they led Joshua from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early in the morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, that they might eat the Passover. And Pilate, okay, now he's being interrogated by Pilate. And he answered him and said, Pilate said, well, okay, Pilate's trying to get to the point of the heart of the matter here. Pilate said, what accusation do you bring against this man? And he answered him and said, well, if he wasn't an evildoer, we certainly wouldn't have brought him up to you. Well, that's a brilliant answer, isn't it? Is that going to stick in a real court? No. Pilate said, well, then you take... Pilate wasn't hearing this. He said, well, then you take him and judge him according to your law. The Jews said to him, well, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. And Pilate entered the praetorium and called Joshua and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? And he said, are you speaking about yourself, speaking for yourself about this, or others tell you this concerning me? Joshua answered Pilate. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I would not be delivered to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from here. Pilate said, so you're rightly a king then? Joshua answered, you rightly say that I'm a king. For this cause I was born and have come into this world, that I should bear witness of the truth, that everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And Pilate said to him, well, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out from the Jews and said to them, look, I don't find any fault in this man. Evidently, when Joshua answered Pilate that my kingdom is not of this world, it eased him a bit, evidently, that it convincing him that, well, look, he's not coming here to overthrow me. He's not, or Rome, or Caesar. So, evidently, Pilate did not have the same fears of Joshua that the Sanhedrin did. But backing up to John 18, let's read a couple of verses, more verses here. Let's back up to verse 12. The detachment of troops. We're going to go 12 through 14. Then the detachment of troops and the captain of the officers of the Jews arrested Joshua, and they bound him. They led him away to Annas first, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. And it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. So no matter how the proceedings came out, this is what we would today call a kangaroo court. Anybody have any question or comment? Whether about what we just read here in the other Gospels concerning getting the forensic statements? I remembered at that time. Getting the forensic statements, or anything else we've read in the passage in Matthew 26. Yes, Lisa?
A little bit earlier we read there in Mark 14, verse 55 and 56. And the footnote in my Bible is really interesting. Those scriptures say, and the chief priests and all the council sought for witness against Joshua to put him to death, and found none, for many bear false witness. And the footnote's interesting. It says the chief priests and sought for a witness. This act was against the law of the Jews. Trials were to begin with evidence that would exonerate the accused, not condemn. And then the fact that they were seeking false witness was a direct transgression against the ninth commandment. So from the get-go, they had an itinerary, and they were
They had an agenda, right?
One way or another, yeah.
Anyone else? Raquel.
Yeah, you know, if you go back to like John 11, 47, you know, in terms of like how I think Caiaphas convinced them, it says the chief priests and Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do, for this man works many signs? If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. And then, you know, and one of them, Caiaphas, before being high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation should perish. So now this he did not say on his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahshua would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also that he would gather together in one of the children of Yah who were scattered abroad, right? So that's how he twisted all of it, like he made it sound heroic. He rationalized it.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, let's go back to Matthew 26, please. Because the high priest, he has an interesting question, an interesting point. In verse 63, after verse 62, verse 62, the high priest rose and said to him, do you answer nothing? That is what the witnesses have said of him. And what does these men testify against you? Well, the witnesses are not in agreement. What's there left to say? But Yahshua kept silent, and the high priest answered him. He said, okay, now I put you under oath by the living Elohim. Tell us whether you're not the Messiah, the son of Elohim. That's interesting he would say that. Whether you are the son of Elohim. Now, why would he make such a statement, such an inquiry? Because it's commonly taught in many churches, both Sunday and Sabbath-keeping churches are guilty of this as well, that there was no known reference to the Father that there was no known reference to the Father. That was only through Yahshua or to the Messiah that this truth of the Father was brought. That is not true. Because we're going to go. I got some footnotes written in the back of this Bible here. Yes. We're going to go review. Well, we're just going to see if this is true or not, this common teaching is true or not. And we're going to examine it strictly to what is commonly called the Old Testament, or the scripture they knew at this time. Let us begin in Exodus 4, verse 22, because we're going to find there are plenty of references to the Father. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't even claim to have all of them in what we're about to go through. I will confess, it's entirely possible and even probable that I missed a couple along the way. Let us start in Exodus 4, verse 22. It's Moses speaking to Pharaoh. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, this is Yahweh speaking to Moses. Then you will, instructing him on what he will tell Pharaoh. Then you will say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. What's the implication? Yahweh speaking unto Moses like that he's a father. Let's try again. Let's try Deuteronomy 32:26, shall we? Deuteronomy 32 and verse 26. Excuse me, verse 6, not 26. Deuteronomy 32, it's verse 6, not 26. My mistake. Deuteronomy 32, verse 6. Do you thus deal with Yahweh, all you foolish and unwise people? Isn't he your father who brought you? Has he not made and established you? Isn't he your father? Moses knew him as the father. Let's try again. Let's try 1 Chronicles 29. Let's see what else Scripture has to say about this. So number one, we can make note that on at least 2 counts that Moses knew. Please make note of that. Now we're going to see who else knew. 1 Chronicles 29 will tell us who else knew. 1 Chronicles 29, verse 10. This is David's prayer before the people. Therefore David blessed Yahweh before all the assembly, and David said, Blessed are you, Yahweh of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Again, blessed are you, Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. David knew this. David understood Yahweh was... Imagine that. Let's try a few others. I got a few others listed here. Let's go. I didn't find anything in the account of Solomon unless I've missed it, and I probably did. But if David knew, who else knew? Undoubtedly, his son Solomon. It would have made sense that David would have taught this to his son Solomon. So we can reason by implication, reasonably arrive that Solomon knew as well. Nonetheless, let's go to Isaiah 63, please. Isaiah 63 and verse 10. I don't know why I said, I can't read my own handwriting. It's 16. 63:16. I knew 10 didn't sound right. It's 16. This is during the prayer of Isaiah. Doubtlessly you are our father. Through Abraham was ignorant of us, and Israel does not acknowledge us. But you, Yahweh, are our father. Two references in that word. And our Redeemer from everlasting is your name. 2 references here that in this one verse, Isaiah knew that Yahweh, he knew of the Father. Let's try 64 verse 8, just a couple pages, just a little bit over. 64 verse 8. But now Yahweh, Isaiah 64 verse 8, but now Yahweh, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. And we are all the work of your hand. How many people on this planet who have read this verse have totally missed that? Yahweh, you are our Father. Because we hear lots of references in both Sabbath and Sunday keeping churches about you're the potter, we are the clay. But it's like all this time, people have looked right over this.
Even my footnote says it's rare.
Rare.
This is one of the rare moments, yeah.
Okay. Let's look over in Jeremiah. Jeremiah 3. Next 2 references ought to be very easy to remember. We got Jeremiah 3:19, then Jeremiah 31:9. Jeremiah 3, verse 19. Let's see what it says. This is during, here we see Jeremiah and a call to repentance to the people. But I said, how could I put you among the children and give you a pleasant land and a beautiful heritage of the host of the nations? I said, you shall call me what? Speak up, everybody. 1, 2, 3. My Father. This is Jeremiah speaking to you. He's teaching the people that Yahweh is, he's teaching them about the Father. You will call me my Father. Let's try 31 verse 9. That was Jeremiah 30:19. We're going to Jeremiah 31:9 now. Jeremiah 31 verse 9. Just put the colon in a different behind the 1. Turn too far. Jeremiah 31 verse 9. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications I will lead them. And I will cause them to walk by the rivers of the waters in a straight way in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Ephraim, and I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my son, or is my firstborn. I am a father. How plain a statement is that? I am their father. You shall call me my Father. Let's try Malachi 6. So we got Moses knowing this. We got David, by implication Samuel, most likely, not Samuel, Solomon. Then we got Isaiah the prophet. We got Jeremiah the prophet. Now let's turn to Malachi 1 verse 6. Now we got more prophets. Malachi 1 verse 6. Malachi 1, verse 6. A son honors his father, and a servant honors his master. But then if I'm your father, where's my honor? If I'm a master, where's my reverence? Says Yahweh of hosts. To you priests who despise what? My name. I find this interesting because this one in particular, I find them all interesting for different reasons. But as it applies to our current study in Matthew 26, particularly while Josh was being questioned, being examined by the high priest, it's quite fitting. Did anyone in that council honor Yahweh? Again, a son honors his father, a servant honors his master. So if I am your father, or if I'm the father, where's my honor? Remember, back in Matthew 26 and verse 63, what we just read shortly, a little while ago. What did the priest specifically ask Joshua? What question did he specifically ask him? Are you the son of Elohim? And yet, look at the closing of verse 6. And so, yet you say, in what way have we despised your... And this who's he specifically addressing? He says, to you priests who despise my name. They're putting him to death for using it. That's what brought out the cries of blasphemy. That's when the high priest tore his garments. Okay, well, that's another matter. I just find this one rather fitting. But let's try Malachi 2:10. Well, the prophet Malachi knew. Now here's verse 10. Have we not all one Father? Has not one Elohim created us all? So why do we deal treacherously with one another by profaning the covenant of our fathers? Have we not all one Father? The same Creator who created us all is in fact our Father. So yes, there were plenty of references in Scripture in what is commonly called the Old Testament, referring us to the Father. Yet these people seemingly had forgotten this. But the priest, how would he know this, to ask this, are you the Son? He seemed to, what's the implication? He understood he was the coming Son. That man, those people said, and they crucified him, they condemned him anyway. Remember, back up what we read earlier in John 3, Nicodemus ratted them all out. At that time, he told that to Yahshua, but he had no idea we were still going to be reading these words 2,000 years later, or nearly 2,000 years later, that we were going to read these words millennia later, and now he's ratting them out to the whole world, whether he realized, and he didn't realize that. He said, remember, he said, we know that you are from Yahweh. They knew. For them to ask a question like that, they had to have known at least some of these scriptures, and I'm not admitting I got them all. It's entirely possible and even probable that I missed a couple along the way. Anyone else? Have any question or comment? Lisa?
And along that line, there in Matthew 6:9, and this is a prayer that people commonly repeat by rote. But when Yeshua was teaching his disciples the manner in which they should pray, he says, "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Mm-hmm. So, right there again, he was laying it all out on the line.
He's laying it all out. And people were still kind of like, huh? You know, it couldn't quite penetrate the skull, did it? That's what it would seem like. Raquel.
Yeah, so I just did a search on the son of Elohim phrase, right? And the ones that recognize him as the son of Elohim, the adversary during the temptation of wilderness.
Oh, he knew that.
The spirits, the demonic spirits. Peter, like really truly got him, and the centurion towards the end when he died on the cross. But the other thing that came up is there's another person that also was called the son of Elohim. And it's in Luke 3, when they talked about 23 to 28, 38, talks about the genealogy of Yahshua. When you go to 38, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of Elohim. So Adam is the son of Elohim.
Well, that would agree with what we read in Malachi too, wouldn't it? Don't we have all have one Father?
Yeah. But it's interesting that,
Because of all mankind, Adam was the first created.
He was considered a son.
He counted him a son.
They counted him as a son.
Anyone else? Okay, Larry,
Just a little change of thought here, because in the Matthew 26, when the high priest came to him and it said, it says, but Joshua kept silent, and answering the high priest said to him, I put you on oath by the living Elohim that you tell us if you are the Messiah, the son of Elohim. And what did Joshua say in verse 64? You said it. I tell
you just said it.
You said it. I tell you more. From this time you shall see the Son of Man setting off at the right hand of Yahweh in power and the coming of the clouds of the heavens. And he's literally quoting the 110th Psalm. And I like to flip over there.
go ahead.
Oh, okay.
The 110th Psalm. And this is where a lot of churches get in trouble. It says, a Psalm of David, a declaration of Yahweh to my Adonai. Sit at my right hand until I place your enemies as your footstool. Yahweh shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion to rule in the midst of your enemies. And so if you read these 7 verses here Yahweh the Father is speaking to, because how is David to say, Yahweh's talking to my Adonai? And a lot of versions use the word Lord. But so it's a recognize that the Father is speaking to somebody else. Okay?
This is a heavenly conversation.
This is a heavenly conversation. And yet, Joshua is telling the high priest, you said it, and furthermore, and he quotes this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you turn over to Daniel 7:13, Daniel 7:13, it says, I was looking in the night visions, and behold, the one like the Son of Man came in the clouds of the heavens, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And dominions was given to him, and glory, and the kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and it shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So when that high priest asked Joshua, tell us, and Joshua said,
You said it.
you said it, and he quotes these scriptures, he's making sure that he instructs them that he will be sitting at the right hand of Yahweh until his enemies are put as a stool for his feet, so to speak. Then in Daniel, they knew these scriptures in Daniel's, and yet they had to have fear in their hearts, knowing what they were doing at that moment, because we now see that everyone would ultimately serve the Messiah.
And yet, with their line of questioning, they knew. Between this and what we knew, what the conversation between Joshua and Nicodemus in John 3, they knew. They rejected him anyway. They were not ignorant when they did this, no. They condemned him anyway.
They were afraid of losing their positions.
They were afraid of losing their position because they spoke truthfully when they said, Caesar is our king. Take this man away. They were not ignorant. So one thing I want us to really take home about this. Okay, John, you first.
The problem with them is that they knew the scriptures, but they didn't understand
Stand them.
And because they thought that Yeshua was going to come there and put his boot in the Romans and put them in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came preaching love and understanding and the Father's word and humility, they couldn't deal with that. This is what it's all about. They knew the scriptures, but they didn't understand it.
They didn't understand fix your own house first. Take the plank out of your own eye. They're worried about how awful. Okay, we got Larry, Lucy, and Raquel.
Okay, I remember Joshua in John 8:44, he told the Pharisees, you're from your father, the devil. Okay? But remember, going all the way back to the very first prophecy, John, I believe it's Genesis 3:15, where it talks about there would be enmity between the seed, okay, and the woman, and the one would be bruised in the heel, and the other one would be bruised in the head, okay. Throughout Bible prophecy, throughout biblical history, we always seen that there were different things that were enacted where the adversary tried to disrupt and end any lineage that would bring forth the Messiah, okay? And yet, here's these Pharisees. They are sons of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing the work of their father, the devil. And in fact, they were enacting a way to be able to kill the Messiah. And we could see how that would turn out for them.
Lucy?
It's very interesting that they knew, they knew all their books, but yet what they gave up was greater than what they earned here on earth, because they gave up, where it says, "He shall cleanse the sons of Levi and refine them as gold and silver, and they shall belong to Yahweh." Right there in Malachi 3. So they gave up that just to have a position on earth, which is meaningless.
They gave that up just to keep their own position.
And it does show that
Yeah.
God really truly did blind them from the truth in order to fulfill a salvation plan for the rest of the world.
Raquel?
Yeah, I think it's deeper than just, they reject him because of, keeping their positions of authority and power. I think they think that they are sons of Elohim. Whenever in scripture it talks about firstborn, the
Mhm.
firstborn is Israel, I think that's why they rejected the Messiah, because I truly believe that they think that's their identity, the son of Elohim.
If we only take one thing home from this study, I'd like you to take home the very fact, the very idea that the idea of the Father was, in the Old Testament was totally unknown is bunk. It's nothing. It's worthless. It's not true. It would seem, so why did Joshua have to explain the Father all over again from scratch? Because between their own sins, the various rebellions, various apostasies, when Israel would fall away, they fell into apostasy and they rebelled against Yahweh over several times over many years. This knowledge seemingly was forgotten. They seemingly had lost that connection some way, somehow. And it come to the point where Joshua had to take him, okay, here's from the scratch. Here's from the beginning here. Here we go. He had to reteach them that all over again from scratch. And somehow it would seem from some people that it just never sank for whatever reason. At least not amongst those. Now those who believed, yes, they got it. They got the message. Those who rejected it, what can we say? Anyone else? Okay, if not, we'll close here. And David Gibson will be back up here at 3 o'clock with the main message.